$3. That's all Evelyn Mercer had when she stood at the San Antonio train station, her stepfather's threats still ringing in her ears. In 48 hours, she was supposed to marry Clayton Burke, a man whose smile never reached his eyes and whose hand had already left bruises on her wrist during their courtship. But tucked inside her worn coat pocket was a crumpled newspaper clipping. Rancher seeks wife. No affection required. Practical arrangement only. The ad promised nothing except escape. And for a woman with nowhere left to run, nothing was exactly enough. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The train to Dust Ridge took 2 days and rattled like a box of rusty nails. Evelyn sat pressed against the window of the cheapest car, watching Texas transform from crowded streets into endless brown plains that seemed to go on forever without changing. The other passengers, mostly men in dusty work clothes and a few families heading west, ignored her completely, which suited her fine. She'd spent the last 3 years learning how to become invisible in her stepfather's house. The skill came naturally now. Her entire life fit into a cracked leather bag at her feet. 2 dresses, a hairbrush with missing bristles. Her mother's locket, the only thing Harold Mercer hadn't managed to sell off during one of his gambling binges. The $3 she'd stolen from his coat pocket while he'd been passed out drunk had already been spent on the train ticket. She had nothing. She was nothing. And maybe that was the point. The newspaper clipping sat folded in her palm, the ink smudged from how many times she'd read it over the past week. Rancher, 34, seeks wife for practical arrangement, remote property, hard work expected, no affection required. Respond to W. Callahan, Dust Ridge, Texas. 17 words that had changed everything. Evelyn hadn't answered the ad expecting romance. She'd answered it the same way a drowning person grabs driftwood, without thinking, without planning, just acting on pure survival instinct. Her response had been equally blunt. I can work, I can cook, I won't complain. When should I arrive? His reply came 4 days later, written in handwriting so cramped it looked angry. June 12th, courthouse at 2. Bring nothing you can't carry. That was it. No questions about her family, her past, her age, no promises about the future. Just a date and a location and an assumption that she'd show up. The scary thing was, she had. Dust Ridge, the conductor shouted, walking through the car. 5 minutes to Dust Ridge. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She gripped the handle of her bag and stood on shaking legs, following 2 ranch hands toward the exit. The train jerked to a stop with a screech of metal that set her teeth on edge. When she stepped onto the platform, the heat hit her like a wall. It was the kind of dry, relentless Texas heat that sucked the moisture right out of your lungs. The sky stretched overhead in a pale, washed-out blue that seemed too big, too empty. Dust Ridge wasn't really a town so much as a collection of buildings that looked embarrassed to exist. A general store, a saloon, a church with peeling paint, and a courthouse that might have been impressive 30 years ago. Maybe a dozen people lived here. Maybe fewer. Evelyn stood on the platform with her bag clutched in both hands, squinting against the sunlight. The other passengers scattered quickly, swallowed up by wagons or family members or the town itself. Within minutes, she was alone. No one came to meet her. Panic started crawling up her throat. What if she'd gotten the date wrong? What if Wade Callahan had changed his mind? What if this whole thing had been some kind of cruel joke, and now she was stranded in the middle of nowhere with no money and no way back? You Evelyn Mercer? The voice came from behind her, low and rough. She spun around. The man standing there looked nothing like what she'd imagined, and she'd imagined plenty during those 2 days on the train. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a way that came from actual work rather than good breeding. Maybe mid-30s, though the sun and wind had carved lines around his eyes that made it hard to tell. Dark hair, darker eyes. A jaw that looked like it had forgotten how to smile years ago. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat pulled low enough to shadow most of his face. Everything about him seemed designed to keep people at a distance. I'm Evelyn, she managed. He looked her over once, not in the leering way Clayton Burke used to, but like he was inspecting a horse he might buy. Practical, detached. Wade Callahan, he said. Then, after a pause, you bring anything else? Just this. She lifted her bag slightly. He nodded once, like that confirmed something he'd already suspected. Courthouse is that way. We've got 30 minutes before the judge leaves for the day. That was it. No greeting, no questions about her journey, no attempt at small talk or reassurance or even basic human warmth. He turned and started walking. Evelyn stood frozen for a moment, her heart hammering. This was insane. She was about to marry a complete stranger who could barely look at her, in a town she'd never heard of until 2 weeks ago, with no plan and no backup, and no way out if things went wrong. But then she thought about Harold Mercer's house, about Clayton Burke's hand around her wrist, about the life that had been waiting for her back in San Antonio, a life that would have slowly crushed every piece of who she was until nothing remained. She picked up her bag and followed Wade Callahan toward the courthouse. Fussy. The judge was a tired-looking man in his 60s, who clearly performed this ceremony often enough that the words had lost all meaning. His office smelled like old paper and tobacco. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes. Name? Evelyn Sarah Mercer. Age? 29. The judge glanced at Wade. You got the license? Wade pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket and handed it over. The judge barely looked at it before pulling out a worn Bible and flipping it open to a page marked with a frayed ribbon. You understand this is a legal marriage? He asked, his tone suggesting he'd given this warning before. All the rights and responsibilities that come with it? Yes, Wade said. The judge looked at Evelyn. Miss Mercer? Her mouth had gone dry. She nodded. Need to hear you say it. Yes, she whispered. Right then. The judge sighed and launched into the fastest wedding ceremony Evelyn had ever witnessed. Not that she'd witnessed many. The words blurred together into legal nonsense about obligations and fidelity until death. At one point she was supposed to repeat something, and she did, her voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Wade's responses were even quieter than hers. Rings? The judge asked. No, Wade said. The judge didn't seem surprised. Fine. By the authority vested in me by the state of Texas, I pronounce you man and wife. He closed the Bible with a thump. Sign here. Evelyn's hand shook as she wrote her name, her new name, in the marriage register. Mrs. Evelyn Callahan. The ink looked too permanent, too real. Wade signed next to her, his handwriting the same cramped, angry script from his letter. That's it, the judge said. Congratulations. The word felt wrong, like calling a business transaction a celebration. Wade paid the judge $2, nodded once, and walked out. Evelyn grabbed her bag and hurried after him into the brutal afternoon sun. The wagon waiting outside the courthouse was old but well-maintained. Wade climbed into the driver's seat without offering to help her up. Not out of cruelty, she sensed, but because it simply didn't occur to him. She managed on her own, settling onto the wooden bench beside him while he clicked his tongue at the horses. They lurched into motion. Dust Ridge disappeared behind them within minutes, swallowed by the endless Texas prairie. The silence stretched out, broken only by the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional snort from one of the horses. Evelyn had never been good with silence. Growing up, her mother had always filled quiet moments with songs or stories or gentle questions about Evelyn's day. After her mother died and Harold Mercer became her stepfather, silence meant danger. It meant he was drunk and angry and looking for someone to blame. But this silence felt different. Not threatening exactly, just empty. How far is the ranch? She asked finally. Hour and a half, Wade said, not looking at her. Do you have help? Ranch hands? 2. They live in the bunkhouse. Another silence. What do you expect from me? That question made him glance at her briefly. His eyes were the color of coffee left too long on the stove, dark and bitter. Keep the house, he said. Cook when you can. I'm gone most days from sunrise to dark. You won't see me much. That's it? That's it. And the marriage part, Wade's jaw tightened. Door to your room has a lock. Use it if you want. I won't bother you. The bluntness should have been reassuring, but somehow it made Evelyn feel even more untethered. What kind of marriage was this? What kind of man married a woman and then promised to leave her alone? She turned to look at the landscape rolling past. The prairie stretched in every direction, brown grass, scattered mesquite trees, distant hills that shimmered in the heat. It was the kind of emptiness that made you understand why people went crazy out here. Why did you place that ad? She asked quietly. Wade was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Needed help with the house. Hiring someone costs money. This made more sense. That's the only reason? His hands tightened on the reins. That's the only reason. Evelyn didn't believe him, but she didn't push. She'd learned a long time ago that pushing men only led to trouble. Instead, she watched the empty prairie and tried not to think about what she'd just done. Broken Mesa Ranch appeared on the horizon just as the sun started its slow descent toward evening. At first, Evelyn thought it was a mirage, buildings shimmering in the heat haze, but as they drew closer, it solidified into something real. A house, a barn, a few smaller outbuildings and corrals. All of it looked tired. The house was a simple two-story structure with a sagging porch and windows that stared out at the prairie like empty eyes. The paint had long since given up and peeled away in strips. The barn leaned slightly to one side, held upright more by stubbornness than structural integrity. But there were signs of care, too. The fences were mended, the corrals were clean. Everything had that worn but functional quality of a place maintained by someone who understood hard work but had given up on making things beautiful. Wade pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Two men emerged from the barn, ranch hands, clearly. One was older, maybe 50, with a salt and pepper beard. The other was younger, probably not even 20 yet. "Boss," the older one said, nodding at Wade. His eyes flicked to Evelyn with poorly concealed curiosity. "Marcus, Danny." Wade climbed down from the wagon. "This is my wife. She'll be managing the house." The word wife hung in the air like something strange and foreign. Marcus recovered first. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. Danny just stared, his mouth slightly open. "Show her where things are," Wade told Marcus. Then, without another word to Evelyn, he turned and walked toward the barn. Just like that. No tour of her new home, no explanation of how anything worked. He just left. Evelyn stood there with her bag, feeling like she'd been abandoned in a foreign country. Marcus cleared his throat. "Well then, let's get you inside, Mrs. Callahan." The house was worse than the exterior had suggested. Dust covered every surface like a second skin. The furniture looked like it had been arranged once, years ago, and never moved since. The kitchen still had dirty dishes in the basin, cobwebs hung in the corners like forgotten decorations. "Mr. Callahan, he don't spend much time inside," Marcus said apologetically, leading her through the downstairs. "Mostly just sleeps here." "How long has he lived here alone?" 3 years, give or take, since Miss Sarah left." Evelyn stopped. "Miss Sarah?" Marcus's face went carefully neutral. "His previous... well, that ain't my story to tell, ma'am. Your room's upstairs, first door on the right. Mr. Callahan takes the one at the end of the hall." He showed her to a bedroom that looked like it had been cleaned recently, or at least more recently than the rest of the house. The bed was made with rough blankets. The window looked east toward the sunrise. There was a wash basin and a small dresser and absolutely nothing else. "I'll bring you some water," Marcus said. "Supper's usually around 7 if you're wanting to cook. Otherwise, Danny and I can handle ourselves." "No, I'll cook," Evelyn said quickly. Having a purpose, any purpose, felt necessary right now. Marcus nodded and left her alone. Evelyn set her bag on the bed and walked to the window. Outside, she could see Wade in the distance, working with the horses in one of the corrals. Even from here, his movements looked precise, controlled, like a man who'd learned to do everything alone and never needed anyone's help. She thought about the marriage certificate sitting in that judge's office, still wet with ink. Thought about the fact that she was now legally bound to a man she'd spoken maybe 50 words to. Thought about how she'd left one prison only to walk straight into another one. Except, this didn't feel like a prison. Not exactly. It felt like exile, like being sent to the edge of the world and forgotten. She touched the locket at her throat, her mother's locket, and whispered, "What have I done?" The prairie wind answered with silence. Whack. Cooking supper turned out to be more challenging than expected. The kitchen was functional, but barely. The stove worked, but the temperature was impossible to control. It ran either too hot or too cold with no middle ground. The pantry held basic supplies: flour, beans, some questionable-looking dried meat, coffee that smelled like it had been there since before the war. Evelyn did the best she could. She made biscuits and beans and coffee strong enough to strip paint. It wasn't impressive, but it was edible. Marcus and Danny appeared right at 7, hats in hands. "Smells good, ma'am," Marcus said, though his expression suggested he was being polite. Wade came in 10 minutes later, pausing in the doorway when he saw the table set with plates and the food waiting. He looked almost confused, like he'd forgotten this was a possibility. They ate in silence. Evelyn had grown up with her mother's dinner table, where conversation flowed naturally and silence meant something was wrong. Then came Harold Mercer's table, where silence meant survival. You stayed quiet and ate fast and didn't draw attention. This silence felt different again. Functional. Like everyone was so used to eating alone that they'd forgotten how to do it together. "Biscuits are good," Danny offered quietly. "Thank you," Evelyn said. Wade didn't comment. He ate methodically, like fueling a machine, and finished before everyone else. He stood, grabbed his hat, and walked toward the door. "Wade," Evelyn said. He stopped, his back to her. "What time should I have breakfast ready?" "Don't worry about it. I'm up before sunrise." "I can wake up early." "Don't," he said. And there was something in his tone that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't kindness either. Just firmness. "I'm used to doing things my own way." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him. Marcus and Danny exchanged glances. "He's always like this?" Evelyn asked. "Pretty much," Marcus admitted. "But don't take it personal, ma'am. Mr. Callahan, he's got his reasons for being the way he is." After the men left, Evelyn cleaned the dishes in the basin, dried them, put them away. The house settled around her with creaks and groans. Outside, the prairie wind picked up, rattling the windows. She climbed the stairs to her room, locked the door like Wade had suggested, and sat on the edge of the bed. This was her life now. This empty house, this silent man, this endless prairie. She'd escaped Harold Mercer and Clayton Burke, but what exactly had she escaped to? Evelyn lay down without changing into her nightdress, staring at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. Her mind kept circling back to the courthouse, to Wade's expressionless face, to the word wife that meant nothing and everything at the same time. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke sometime later to darkness and the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Her heart jumped. She sat up, listening. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Evelyn held her breath, her hand moving instinctively toward the locked door handle. For a moment, she was certain he would try it, certain that all his promises about leaving her alone had been lies, and now the footsteps moved away. Down the hall, a door opened and closed. Silence again. Evelyn let out a shaky breath and lay back down, her heart still racing. This was going to take some getting used to. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through the eastern window and the sound of nothing. The house was empty. Wade was already gone. She dressed quickly and went downstairs, finding the kitchen exactly as she'd left it. No dirty dishes, no sign that anyone had eaten breakfast. But there was something new. A bucket of fresh water sat just outside the back door, still cold from the well. Evelyn stared at it confused. She hadn't mentioned needing water. She hadn't asked for anything. But there it was, fresh and cold and clearly placed there deliberately. She carried it inside and started coffee, her mind working through this small mystery. Wade had said he didn't want her waking up early for him, but he'd made sure she had water for when she did wake. It was the smallest gesture, barely a gesture at all, but it was something. The morning passed slowly. Evelyn spent it cleaning, which gave her something to do and a way to understand her new environment. The house revealed itself in layers, evidence of a woman's touch from years ago, now buried under dust and neglect. Faded curtains that had once been cheerful. A kitchen organized with care, now falling into chaos. Someone had loved this house once. Someone had left. Evelyn found herself wondering about Miss Sarah, whoever she was. What had driven her away? Had it been the isolation? The hardship? Or had it been Wade himself, this silent, closed-off man who seemed to prefer horses to people? By noon, she'd cleaned the kitchen and the downstairs sitting room. Her hands were raw, and her back ached, but the house looked better, almost welcoming. Marcus brought lunch to the house around 1, bread and cheese and dried beef that they all ate standing up. "Mr. Callahan, he usually eats in the barn," Marcus explained. "Didn't know if you'd want company or not." "Company is fine," Evelyn said. The silence of the house had been getting to her. Danny, who'd been quiet all morning, finally spoke up. It's nice. Having someone in the house again makes the place feel less haunted. Danny, Marcus warned. What? It's true. This place has felt cursed for... That's enough. Evelyn looked between them. Cursed? Marcus sighed. Folks talk. Don't mean nothing. This ranch has had some hard years is all. People like to make up stories. What kind of stories? The kind that ain't true, Marcus said firmly. Then, more gently, Mr. Callahan is a good man, ma'am. Hard, maybe, but fair. He's been through some difficult times, and he's still standing. That counts for something. Evelyn nodded slowly, not entirely reassured. After lunch, she tackled the upstairs. There were 4 bedrooms, hers, Wade's, and 2 others that sat empty and unused. She left Wade's door closed, respecting his privacy, but cleaned everything else. The sun was starting to set when she heard horses outside. Wade was back. She hurried downstairs, wiping her dusty hands on her apron. He came through the door looking exhausted, his clothes covered in dirt and sweat. He stopped when he saw her, taking in the cleaned kitchen and the smell of supper cooking. You didn't have to do all this, he said. I know, but I did anyway. He stood there for a moment, looking uncomfortable. Then he walked past her toward the stairs. I'll wash up. Supper was quieter than the night before, if that was even possible. Marcus and Danny ate quickly and excused themselves. Wade sat across from Evelyn, methodically working through his plate. I cleaned the house, Evelyn said, breaking the silence. At least the downstairs and the bedrooms. Except yours. I noticed. There's a lot that needs fixing. The curtains in the sitting room are falling apart. One of the bedroom doors doesn't close properly. The pantry needs... Make a list, Wade interrupted. I'll take care of it. I can help. Make a list, he repeated, not unkindly. I'll take care of it. Evelyn bit back her frustration. She wasn't used to being shut down like this over and over, but she also wasn't sure how to fight it without making things worse. They finished eating in silence. Wade stood, grabbed his hat, and paused at the door. The water, he said without turning around. I'll keep leaving it, in case you need it. Then he was gone. Evelyn sat alone at the table, listening to his footsteps fade into the evening. Outside, the Texas sky turned purple and gold, and somewhere in the distance, coyotes started their nightly chorus. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, reminding her just how far she was from everything she'd ever known. She touched her mother's locket and whispered, I can do this. The house creaked in response. And Evelyn Callahan, wife to a stranger, keeper of an empty house, exile on the edge of the world, started washing the dishes and tried to believe her own words. Monsen. Days turned into a week, then 2. A routine emerged, slow and awkward but real. Wade left before sunrise every morning. Fresh water appeared outside the back door. Evelyn cleaned, cooked, and slowly brought the house back from the dead. Supper happened at 7 with few words. Wade disappeared afterward, usually to the barn or the porch. They circled each other like strangers sharing a stagecoach, polite, distant, careful not to touch. But small things kept happening. One morning, Evelyn found that the broken bedroom door had been repaired overnight. She hadn't even put it on the list yet. Another day, the sagging porch step was suddenly solid again. Wade never mentioned these fixes, never asked for thanks. He just did them. And every morning, without fail, there was fresh water waiting. Evelyn started to understand that this was how Wade communicated. Not with words, but with actions. Small, practical gestures that said, I see you here. I know you exist. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't affection, but it was something. The ranch hands opened up to her gradually. Marcus told stories about his years working cattle across Texas. Danny, who was painfully shy, started lingering after supper to ask if she needed help with anything. You're different from Miss Sarah, Danny said one evening while helping her carry water. How so? You stayed. The words hit harder than Evelyn expected. How long was she here? 6 months, maybe. Then the drought hit and she left. Just packed up one day and took the morning stage. Mr. Callahan came back from the south pasture and found a note on the kitchen table. Evelyn's chest tightened. What did it say? Danny shrugged. Don't know, but he burned it in the stove. We all heard him smashing things in here that night. Next morning, he came out like nothing happened and never spoke about her again. That explained so much. The emotional walls, the refusal to let anyone close. Wade had been abandoned, and he'd decided never to risk it again. Which meant Evelyn was just, what? A practical solution? A housekeeper with a marriage certificate? She tried not to think about it. Instead, she focused on the work. She replanted the neglected garden behind the house. She organized the chaotic pantry. She mended curtains and scrubbed floors and slowly turned the house into something that felt less like a tomb. And every evening, Wade came home exhausted, ate in silence, and disappeared. Until the night everything changed. Buses. It was late September when Evelyn made the mistake with the supply room. The small room off the kitchen had become a dumping ground for everything Wade didn't know where else to put. Old tools, broken equipment, supplies bought and forgotten. Evelyn had avoided it for weeks, but finally she couldn't stand it anymore. She spent an entire afternoon reorganizing everything. Tools on one shelf, supplies on another. She threw out things that were broken beyond repair and made a new list of what they actually needed. When she finished, the room was functional, logical, clean. She was proud of herself, right up until Wade came home and saw what she'd done. He stood in the doorway of the supply room, his face unreadable. "You moved everything." "It was a mess. I couldn't find anything. Now I had a system." "Wade, you had chaos. Nothing was labeled. Half the tools were It was my chaos," he said, and there was an edge to his voice she hadn't heard before. "My house, my system." Evelyn felt heat rise in her face. "I was trying to help. I didn't ask for help. You never asked for anything. You barely speak to me. I'm supposed to just, what? Sit here like furniture? I live here too, Wade. I'm your wife." The word hung between them like something sharp. "In name only," Wade said coldly. The words hit like a slap. Evelyn stepped back, her throat tight. "Right, of course. How could I forget?" She pushed past him and headed for the stairs. "Evelyn, don't," she said without turning around. "Just don't." She locked herself in her room and refused to come down for supper. She could hear Marcus and Danny downstairs, their voices low and uncertain. Later, she heard Wade's heavy footsteps in the hall, stopping outside her door. He didn't knock. She didn't unlock it. Eventually, he walked away. Evelyn lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling stupid and angry and hurt. She'd known what this marriage was. She'd agreed to the terms. But somewhere along the way, between the fresh water and the repaired doors and the quiet care he showed without acknowledging it, she'd started to hope for something more. And hope, as she'd learned long ago, was dangerous. She fell asleep still dressed, her face pressed into the pillow so no one would hear her cry. She woke to darkness and the sound of knocking. Not on her door, somewhere downstairs. Evelyn sat up, confused and disoriented. The knocking came again, urgent, insistent. She heard Wade's door open, his footsteps on the stairs. Voices. Marcus's, agitated and fast. Something was wrong. Evelyn grabbed her shawl and hurried downstairs in time to see Wade pulling on his coat. "What's happening?" she asked. Marcus turned to her, his face tight with worry. "Storm coming in from the north. Bad one. We've got to secure everything before it hits." "How bad?" "Bad enough that we might lose cattle if they scatter. We need every hand we can get." Wade was already heading for the door. "Stay inside," he told Evelyn. "I can help." "Stay inside," he repeated, harder this time. Then he was gone, Marcus and Danny following. Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the wind pick up outside. Through the window she could see dark clouds rolling in, blotting out the stars. The first drops of rain hit the roof. Then the deluge began. Quote, "The storm came like something alive and angry. Rain slammed against the windows. Wind screamed around the corners of the house. Lightning split the sky, turning everything white for brief, terrible moments. Evelyn paced the kitchen, jumping at every crack of thunder. She could see lights moving in the distance. Lanterns, probably, as the men tried to secure the ranch before everything fell apart. An hour passed. Then 2. The storm only got worse. And then she saw it. A fence post collapsing in the eastern corral, visible in a flash of lightning. Cattle were going to scatter. They'd lose everything. Wade was out there with only Marcus and Danny, 3 men against a storm that sounded like the end of the world. Evelyn didn't let herself think. She grabbed her coat, pulled on her boots, and ran out into the rain. The storm hit her like a physical thing, rain so hard it felt like needles. Wind that nearly knocked her sideways. She could barely see 3 feet ahead. "Wade!" she screamed, but the wind tore the word away. She ran toward the corrals, slipping in the mud, her dress already soaked through. Lightning showed her the chaos, cattle milling in panic, fences sagging, and there, in the middle of it all, Wade fighting to hold a gate closed while the wind tried to rip it from his hands. Evelyn ran to him. He saw her coming, and his eyes went wide. "What the hell are you— Where do you need me?" she yelled over the storm. "I told you to stay— Where do you need me?" For a moment he just stared at her. Then, "The north fence. It's coming down. If we don't hold it, we lose half the herd." Evelyn ran. The next 2 hours were a blur of rain and mud and screaming muscles. She grabbed fence posts with her bare hands and held them upright while Wade hammered supports into the muddy ground. She chased cattle back from gaps in the fence, waving her arms and shouting until her voice went hoarse. She hauled rope and carried tools and did whatever needed doing without hesitation. The rain soaked through every layer. Her dress became a heavy, muddy weight. Her hair came loose and whipped across her face. She couldn't feel her fingers anymore. But she didn't stop. None of them stopped. Marcus worked the east side. Danny ran between corrals. Wade was everywhere at once, his face grim with determination. And Evelyn stayed beside him, matching him step for step, refusing to quit. The storm began to break sometime around dawn. The rain softened from a roar to a steady drumming. The wind died down. The sky lightened from black to gray. Evelyn stood in the mud outside the main corral, breathing hard, her whole body shaking with exhaustion. Wade was a few feet away, leaning against a fence post, his hat gone, his hair plastered to his head. Marcus and Danny emerged from the barn, both looking like they'd been through a war. "We get them all?" Marcus called. "Think so," Wade said hoarsely. "Check the count when it's lighter." "Yes, sir." The 2 ranch hands headed for the bunkhouse, leaving Wade and Evelyn alone in the gray morning light. They stood there in silence, covered in mud, soaked to the bone, surrounded by the wreckage of the storm. And then Wade turned to look at her. Really look at her. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Evelyn's legs were shaking so hard she thought she might fall down, but she met his eyes. "I know." Something shifted in his expression, something she couldn't quite name. "You're bleeding," he said. She looked down. Her hands were torn up from the fence posts, blood mixing with mud and rain. She hadn't even felt it. "It's nothing," she said. "It's not nothing." Wade walked to her, moving stiffly. For a moment she thought he might actually touch her, reach for her hands, check the damage. But he stopped just short, his jaw working like he was fighting something internal. "Come on," he said finally. "Let's get you inside." They walked to the house together, too tired to speak. The sky continued to lighten, revealing the full extent of the damage. Downed branches, scattered equipment, mud everywhere. But the fences had held. The cattle were safe. The ranch had survived. At the back door, Wade paused. "Evelyn." She turned to him. He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his dark eyes. Then he said very quietly, "Thank you." 2 words. That was all. But they landed in Evelyn's chest like something precious and fragile. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and went inside. Okay. The house was cold and empty, but Evelyn barely noticed. She climbed the stairs on shaking legs, peeled off her ruined dress, and washed the blood and mud from her hands. The cuts stung, but they weren't deep. She pulled on a dry nightdress and sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly so tired she could barely think. There was a soft knock on her door. "Evelyn?" Wade's voice, rough and uncertain. She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, changed into dry clothes, holding a small tin. "Salve," he said, "for your hands." She took it wordlessly. They stood there for a moment, the silence different than it had been before. Less empty, more full. "I'm sorry," Wade said finally. "About yesterday. The supply room. You were right. It needed organizing." Evelyn blinked in surprise. "I shouldn't have changed everything without asking. I'm not good at asking." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not good at most things involving people." You did fine tonight. That's different. That's work. I know how to work. He paused. I don't know how to do this. This? He gestured vaguely between them. This? Whatever this is supposed to be. Evelyn's chest tightened. It's supposed to be a marriage. In name only, Wade said, echoing his words from the day before, but this time his voice was quieter, almost questioning. Is that what you want? Evelyn asked. The silence stretched. I don't know, Wade admitted. I thought I did. When I wrote that ad, I thought I could keep everything simple, practical, no emotions, no risk. He looked at her directly. But then you ran into a storm to save cattle that aren't even yours, and I don't know what to do with that. Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest. I did it because this is my home now. These are my cattle. This is my ranch too. Is it? I want it to be. Wade stared at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something vulnerable in his expression. Something almost like hope buried under years of carefully constructed walls. I can't promise to be easy to live with, he said quietly. I've spent too long alone. I'm used to my own ways. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for honest. He nodded slowly. I can do honest. Then be honest now. Why did you really place that ad? Wade was quiet for a long moment, then, because this house was killing me. The silence of it. Coming home every night to nothing. I thought maybe having someone here would make it hurt less. Did it? Yeah, he said softly. It did. Evelyn's throat went tight. She looked down at the tin of salve in her hands, then back up at him. I didn't come here expecting anything. I was just running, but somewhere along the way I stopped running and started staying. I noticed. I want to keep staying, Wade, if you'll let me. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached out slowly, carefully, and took one of her damaged hands in his. His touch was gentle despite the calluses, his thumb tracing the edge of a cut. Let me help, he said. So she did. They sat on the edge of her bed while Wade cleaned and bandaged her hands with the kind of focused care he usually reserved for injured horses. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. When he finished, he stood to leave, pausing at the door. Get some rest, he said. Wade? He turned back. I don't want separate rooms anymore, Evelyn said quietly. Not if you don't. The words hung in the air between them. Wade's expression shifted, surprise, uncertainty, and something that might have been relief. Are you sure? He asked. I'm sure. He nodded slowly. Okay, but we'll take it slow. We barely know each other. I know. And I'm not good at... I know, Evelyn said again, softer this time. We'll figure it out together. Something eased in Wade's face, the beginnings of a smile, rusty from disuse but real. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. All right. After he left, Evelyn lay down and closed her eyes. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The first rays of actual sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the wet prairie gold. And for the first time since arriving in Dust Ridge, Evelyn Callahan fell asleep feeling like she'd finally found solid ground. The morning after the storm, Evelyn woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She sat up, disoriented. Her hands ached where the cuts had scabbed over, and every muscle in her body screamed in protest. For a moment she couldn't remember why she hurt so badly, and then it all came rushing back, the rain, the fences, Wade's careful hands bandaging her wounds, the conversation at her door. I don't want separate rooms anymore. Heat rushed to her face. Had she really said that? Out loud? To a man she'd known for less than a month? She dressed quickly, wincing as her stiff muscles protested, and made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, but not empty quiet. Someone is here quiet. Wade stood at the stove, pouring coffee into 2 cups. He'd clearly been up for hours. His hair was damp from washing, his clothes clean. But there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much. He turned when he heard her on the stairs. Morning, he said. You made coffee. Seemed fair. You've been doing it for weeks. He held out one of the cups. How are your hands? Sore, but fine. She took the coffee, their fingers brushing briefly. Neither of them pulled away too fast. How's the ranch? Better than it could have been. Lost part of the south fence, but the cattle stayed put. Marcus and Danny are out doing repairs. He paused. I told them to take it slow. Nobody slept much. Including you. Wade shrugged. I'm used to it. They stood in the kitchen drinking coffee, the silence less awkward than it might have been. Evelyn found herself studying him in the morning light, the lines around his eyes, the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man expecting bad news. About last night, she started. You don't have to... I meant what I said. Wade looked at her directly. So did I. About taking it slow. How slow? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I don't know. This isn't something I've done before. Been married? Been married and actually wanted to make it work. He set his cup down carefully. With Sarah, it was different. We knew each other before. Her father owned the neighboring ranch. Everyone assumed we'd marry eventually, so we did. But we didn't really know each other. Not the important parts. Evelyn leaned against the counter. What happened during the drought? Wade's jaw tightened. Everything died. Cattle, crops, hope. I was out in the field 16 hours a day trying to save something, anything. When I'd come home, she'd be sitting in the parlor with her bags packed, talking about going back to San Antonio where things were civilized. He stared into his coffee. One day I came back and she was gone. Left a note saying she'd tried, but she couldn't watch everything fall apart. That must have been hard. The ranch surviving without her was harder, because it meant I didn't actually need her. She knew it. I knew it. He looked up. I told myself I'd never make that mistake again. Never let someone in who'd just leave when things got difficult. But you placed the ad anyway. Yeah, I did. His voice was quiet. I guess I'm a hypocrite. Or maybe you're just lonely, Evelyn said gently. Wade didn't deny it. He just stood there, holding his empty coffee cup like he didn't know what to do with his hands. I should get to work, he said finally. Wade. He stopped. Thank you for the coffee. Something eased in his expression. You're welcome. After he left, Evelyn stood in the kitchen and tried to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't the arrangement she'd signed up for. This was something messier, more complicated, more real. And that terrified her almost as much as it didn't. The rest of that day passed in a haze of exhaustion and small repairs. Evelyn's body felt like it had been trampled by horses, but she pushed through anyway. She couldn't just sit around while everyone else worked. That wasn't who she was. She spent the afternoon in the garden behind the house, salvaging what the storm hadn't destroyed. The tomato plants were a loss, beaten into the mud, but the herbs had survived, and some of the hardier vegetables. She worked carefully, her bandaged hands clumsy but functional. Marcus found her there around 3, carrying a basket. Mrs. Callahan, you should be resting. I've been resting my whole life. It didn't get me anywhere. He chuckled at that and set the basket down. Fair enough. Brought you some eggs from the hen house. Figured you might want them for supper. Thank you. Evelyn sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. Marcus, can I ask you something? Yes, ma'am. What was Wade like before Sarah left? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. Different. Not happy exactly, but less shut down. He'd joke with the hand sometimes. Play cards on Saturday nights. After she left, it was like someone blew out a light inside him. He looked toward the barn where Wade was working. Last few weeks, though, I've seen glimpses of the old Wade. Little things, like maybe that light's trying to come back on. Evelyn's chest tightened. No pressure, then. I'm not saying it's your responsibility to fix him, ma'am. Lord knows a person can only fix themselves. But having you here, it's helping, whether he knows how to say it or not. After Marcus left, Evelyn stayed in the garden a while longer, thinking about lights going out and maybe, possibly, coming back on again. Supper that night was different. Wade came in earlier than usual, washed up at the basin, and actually sat down before the food got cold. Danny and Marcus joined them, and for the first time, the conversation flowed a little easier. What'd you think of your first Texas storm, Mrs. Callahan? Danny asked, serving himself beans. I think Texas is trying to kill me, Evelyn said. Danny laughed. That's about right. Welcome to the frontier. You handled yourself real well out there, Marcus added. Most folks would have stayed inside. Most folks are smarter than me, apparently. Wade glanced at her, something that might have been amusement in his eyes. Smart enough to keep the fences from collapsing. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd heard from him in company, and it made her pulse quicken stupidly. After the ranch hands left, Wade helped her clear the table. Actually helped, carrying dishes, wiping down surfaces. It was such a small thing, but it felt monumental. "You don't have to do this," Evelyn said. "I know, but you cooked. Seems fair." They worked in silence for a few minutes. Then Wade said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about not wanting separate rooms." Evelyn's hand stilled in the wash basin. And I think, maybe we should have supper together. Just us. Once a week. No ranch hands, no work talk. Just talking. Like a normal married couple. Something like that. He looked uncomfortable, like he was navigating foreign territory. "Friday nights, maybe, if that works for you." Evelyn felt a smile tugging at her mouth. "Friday nights work fine." "Good. Okay." Wade nodded, looking relieved that she'd agreed. Then he grabbed his hat and headed for the door, pausing on the threshold. "Sleep well, Evelyn." "You too." After he left, Evelyn finished the dishes with a strange lightness in her chest. Friday night supper. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The week that followed established a new rhythm. Wade still left before sunrise, but now he'd linger an extra minute or two in the kitchen, drinking coffee while Evelyn started breakfast. They didn't talk much. Wade wasn't built for morning conversation, but the silence felt companionable instead of empty. During the days, Evelyn continued her campaign to resurrect the house. She tackled the upstairs hallway, scrubbing years of dust from the windows until actual sunlight poured through. She reorganized the linen closet, mended curtains, and discovered a broken rocking chair in one of the empty bedrooms that she thought might be salvageable. One afternoon, she found a box of books tucked away in a corner, dusty novels and poetry collections that must have belonged to Sarah. Evelyn almost put them back, not wanting to intrude on old ghosts. But then she thought about how empty the evenings were, how much she missed reading, and she kept them. That night she was sitting on the porch with one of the books when Wade came back from checking the north pasture. He stopped when he saw her, surprise flickering across his face. "Didn't know you read," he said. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet." He settled onto the porch step a few feet away. "What are you reading?" Evelyn showed him the cover. "Poetry. Whitman." Wade's expression shifted, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "Sarah's book." "I can put it back if—" "No, keep it." He looked out at the darkening prairie. She hated poetry, actually. Only bought those books because she thought they made her look cultured. Never read a single one. "That's sad." "Yeah, it is." He was quiet for a moment. "You like poetry?" "My mother used to read it to me, before she died." Wade glanced at her. "How old were you?" 16. "Pneumonia. She was gone in 3 days." Evelyn traced the edge of the book. "My stepfather married her for her money. After she died, he kept me around because I could cook and clean for free. Then when I turned 28, he decided I was more valuable as a bargaining chip. The man he wanted you to marry, Clayton Burke, cattle broker from a wealthy family. He'd get a young wife, my stepfather would get business connections. Everyone wins except me." Wade's hands tightened into fists. "He ever hurt you?" The question was asked quietly, but there was an edge to it that made Evelyn look at him carefully. "Once," she admitted. "Grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise when I tried to walk away from him at a party. That's when I knew I had to leave." "You should have broken his nose." Evelyn laughed, surprised. "I thought about it." "Next time, do it." Wade stood, stretching his back. "Any man puts his hands on you like that deserves worse than a broken nose." There was something protective in his tone that made Evelyn's throat tight. She stood too, closing the book. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For being nothing like him." Wade looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he nodded and headed inside, leaving Evelyn on the porch with her heart beating too fast. Friday came sooner than expected. Evelyn spent the afternoon trying to make something special for their first real supper together. The pantry options were limited, but she managed a decent stew and biscuits, plus dried apple pie using supplies she'd found in the cellar. Wade came in at 6, earlier than usual, already washed and changed. He looked nervous, which was oddly endearing. "Smells good," he said. "It's just stew." "Haven't had pie in 2 years." They sat across from each other at the table, and for the first few minutes, neither seemed to know what to say. The absence of Marcus and Danny made the silence feel heavier somehow. "So," Wade started awkwardly, "how was your week?" Evelyn bit back a smile. "Fine. Yours?" "Fine." Silence. This was going to be harder than she thought. "Tell me about the ranch," she tried. "How long have you had it?" Wade relaxed slightly, settling into familiar territory. 8 years. Bought it from a man who'd given up on it. The land was good, but neglected. Took 3 years just to get it functional. "You did all that yourself?" "Marcus was here. Danny came later, but yeah, mostly myself." "That's impressive," he shrugged. "It's just work." "It's more than work. It's building something." Wade looked at her, something uncertain in his eyes. "I guess it is." The conversation came easier after that. Wade told her about the early years of the ranch, the struggles and small victories. Evelyn talked about her childhood before her mother died, the books she used to read, the garden her mother kept. They were halfway through the pie when Wade said, "I fixed that rocking chair." "What?" "The one you found upstairs. It needed a new slat and some sanding, but it's solid now. I left it on the back porch." Evelyn stared at him. "When did you have time to do that?" "Evenings, after supper." He looked down at his plate. "Figured you might like it, for reading." Something warm bloomed in Evelyn's chest. "Thank you." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." Wade met her eyes, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with something neither of them had words for. "This is nice," Evelyn said quietly. "This. Us talking." "Yeah," Wade agreed. "It is." After supper, they washed dishes together. Evelyn washing, Wade drying. Their hands brushed a few times, and neither of them pulled away like they might have a week ago. When everything was clean, Wade walked her to the bottom of the stairs. "I'll see you in the morning," he said. Evelyn hesitated, then leaned up and kissed his cheek, quick and light, barely more than a touch. Wade went very still. "Good night, Wade," she said, and hurried upstairs before she could lose her nerve. She didn't see his expression, but she heard him stand there for a long moment before walking away. That night, lying in bed, Evelyn touched her lips and wondered what she was doing. This was supposed to be simple, practical. A business arrangement between two people who needed each other for survival. Except somewhere along the way, it had stopped being simple, and she wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her more. The next morning, Wade was already gone when she came downstairs, but there was fresh coffee waiting, still hot, and a note on the table in his cramped handwriting. "Thank you for supper. W." 3 weeks into October, a letter arrived. Marcus brought it from town, handing it to Evelyn with a curious look. The return address made her stomach drop, San Antonio. She opened it with shaking hands. It was from Margaret, her oldest friend, one of the few people who'd shown her kindness during those dark years with her stepfather. The letter was full of San Antonio gossip, news about people Evelyn barely remembered. And then, buried in the third paragraph, "I thought you should know. Thomas Brennan married Elizabeth Crawford last month. Big ceremony at her father's estate. Half the city was there. I know you cared for him once, and I wanted you to hear it from me rather than through rumors." Evelyn read the words 3 times, each reading making them more real. Thomas Brennan. The only man she'd ever actually loved. They'd courted secretly for 6 months before her stepfather found out and put a stop to it. Thomas had been kind, gentle, everything Clayton Burke wasn't. She'd thought, well, it didn't matter what she'd thought. He'd clearly moved on. And she was here, married to a stranger on the edge of nowhere. The unfairness of it hit her like a physical blow. She folded the letter carefully and went upstairs, locking herself in her room. She didn't cry. She'd learned years ago that crying didn't fix anything. But she sat on the edge of the bed, holding her mother's locket, and felt the weight of every choice that had led her here. When she didn't come down for supper, Wade noticed. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, the soft knock on her door. "Evelyn, you all right?" "I'm fine, just tired." Silence. Then, "Can I come in?" She should have said no. Should have told him she needed space. Instead, she unlocked the door. Wade stood in the hallway, concern written across his face. "You look like hell." "Thank you. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." He didn't smile. "What happened?" "Nothing. I got a letter from an old friend, that's all." "Must have been some letter." Evelyn turned away, walking to the window. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under the late afternoon sun. "Someone I used to know got married. It shouldn't matter. It's been years, but it matters anyway," Wade finished quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Wade was silent for a moment. Then he crossed the room and stood beside her at the window, not touching, just present. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. "Not really." "Okay." They stood there as the sun sank lower, turning the prairie gold and orange. Wade didn't leave, didn't push, just stood there like a solid wall against whatever storm was brewing inside her head. Finally, Evelyn said, "His name was Thomas. We courted secretly for months. My stepfather found out and threatened to throw me out if I didn't stop seeing him. Thomas said we'd run away together, make it work somehow, but then—" She swallowed hard. "Then his family offered him a position in their business, and suddenly running away seemed less appealing. He stopped coming around, stopped writing. I waited like an idiot for 6 months before I finally accepted he wasn't coming back." "He's the idiot," Wade said flatly. "Not you. You don't know that. Maybe I wasn't worth the trouble." Wade turned to look at her directly. "Anyone who thinks that is a damn fool." The conviction in his voice surprised her. She met his eyes, searching for insincerity and finding none. "You really believe that?" she said. "Yeah, I do." He hesitated, then added, "You ran into a storm to save cattle that weren't yours. You left everything you knew with $3 and a newspaper clipping because the alternative was worse. You're here, making a life out of nothing, and you haven't complained once. Thomas Brennan is an idiot for letting you go." Evelyn's throat went tight. "Wade, and I'm sorry," he continued, his voice rougher now. "I'm sorry you got hurt. I'm sorry that man was too stupid to see what he had. But I'm not sorry you ended up here." The words hung in the air between them. "I'm not sorry either," Evelyn whispered. Wade reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Whatever else happens, you're not alone." Something broke inside Evelyn's chest, some last wall she'd been holding up against this strange, impossible situation. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Wade's waist, pressing her face against his chest. He went rigid with surprise. For a heartbeat, she thought he'd push her away, but then his arms came around her carefully, like he was afraid she might break, like he'd forgotten how to hold another person and was trying to remember. They stood like that for a long time, not speaking, just breathing together while the sunset painted the prairie in impossible colors. Finally, Wade said, "I'm not good at this." "You're doing fine." "I mean it. I don't know how to. I spent 3 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone, that it was easier alone." Evelyn pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Was it easier?" Wade's expression was raw. "No, it was just lonelier." She reached up and touched his face, just her fingertips against his jaw, feeling the scratch of stubble. He closed his eyes like the touch hurt. "We're both terrible at this," Evelyn said softly, "but maybe we can be terrible at it together." Wade opened his eyes, and there was something in them that made her heart stutter. "Together," he repeated, then quieter. "I'd like that." He left a few minutes later, both of them needing space to process whatever had just shifted between them. But that night at supper, Wade sat closer. Their knees bumped under the table. Neither of them moved away. And when Evelyn went upstairs to bed, she found the rocking chair had been moved from the back porch to her room, positioned perfectly by the window. The letter from Margaret still sat on her dresser, but it didn't hurt quite as much anymore. Because Thomas Brennan had married someone else and moved on with his life. And maybe, finally, Evelyn could do the same. The days grew shorter as October faded toward November. The mornings were cold enough now that Evelyn's breath fogged when she went outside to gather eggs. The prairie grass turned brown and brittle, rustling in the constant wind like something whispering secrets. Wade started coming in earlier, joining Evelyn on the porch in the evenings while she read. Sometimes he'd bring work, leather that needed mending, tools that needed sharpening. Sometimes he'd just sit, listening to her read poetry aloud. "You have a nice voice," he said one evening. Evelyn looked up from the book, surprised. "What?" "For reading. It's nice." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. My mother used to read to us before she died." Wade stared out at the darkening prairie. "I'd forgotten that until just now." "How old were you when she passed?" 12. Fever took her in the winter. My father lasted another 2 years before he drank himself to death. He said it matter-of-factly, like reciting weather patterns. "Left me this ranch and a pile of debt. Took me 10 years to pay it off." Evelyn closed the book. "I'm sorry." "Long time ago." But his voice was tight. She reached over and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Wade looked down at their joined hands like he couldn't quite believe it was happening. "You don't have to do everything alone anymore," Evelyn said gently. "I know, I'm trying to remember that." They sat in silence, hands linked, while the stars came out one by one overhead. That night, after they'd both gone to bed, Evelyn heard Wade's footsteps pause outside her door again. This time, though, he knocked. "Come in," she said. He opened the door, standing in the threshold, looking uncertain. "I was thinking, if you wanted, your room is colder than mine. The fireplace doesn't draw right. If you wanted to move your things to my room, there's space." Evelyn's heart started hammering. "Wade, just for warmth," he said quickly. "Winter's coming, and you'll freeze in here. I'll sleep on the floor if you want. I don't want you to be cold." He was giving her an excuse, a practical reason, a way to say yes without admitting what they both wanted. Evelyn stood, walking over to him. "I don't want you sleeping on the floor." Wade swallowed hard. "Okay. And I don't want separate rooms anymore. Not really." "Okay," he repeated, quieter. "But we go slow, like you said." "As slow as you need," Evelyn smiled. "Then yes, I'll move my things tomorrow." The relief on Wade's face was almost painful to see. He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "Evelyn?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you answered that ad." Before she could respond, he was gone, his footsteps retreating down the hall. Evelyn stood there, her heart so full it ached, and whispered to the empty room, "So am I." The next day, she moved her clothes and few belongings into Wade's room at the end of the hall. It was larger than hers, warmer, with a fireplace that actually worked. The bed was bigger too, big enough for 2 people who were still learning how to be close. That first night was awkward. They lay on opposite sides of the bed, carefully not touching, both pretending to sleep while being hyper-aware of every breath the other took. But by the third night, Evelyn woke to find herself curled against Wade's back, her arm around his waist. He was awake too. She could tell by his breathing. Neither of them moved. And in the morning, over coffee, Wade's hand brushed hers and stayed there a moment longer than necessary. They were learning. Slowly, carefully, like 2 people who'd forgotten how to trust and were trying to remember. But they were learning. November brought the first real cold snap, and with it, a rhythm that felt almost normal. Evelyn woke each morning to Wade's warmth beside her, though he was always careful to stay on his side of the bed. They'd have coffee together in the pre-dawn darkness, her reading while he planned the day's work. Sometimes their feet would touch under the table. Sometimes Wade's hand would rest on her shoulder as he passed behind her chair. Small touches. Careful ones. Like they were both testing the boundaries of this new thing between them. The ranch demanded constant attention as winter approached. There were fences to reinforce, supplies to stockpile, cattle to move to better pasture before the ground froze. Wade worked from sunup to well past dark most days, coming home exhausted and covered in dirt. But he always came home. And Evelyn was always waiting. One evening, in mid-November, she was making bread when Wade came through the door looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. He dropped into a chair at the table without even taking off his boots. "Long day?" she asked. "Found a break in the fence line near Black Prairie. Took hours to fix." He rubbed his face. "We're going to need more lumber before winter really hits, which means a trip to town." "When?" "Tomorrow, probably. Need to leave early to make it back before dark." Evelyn wiped flour from her hands. "Can I come?" Wade looked up, surprised. "To town? I haven't left the ranch since I arrived, and we could use supplies for the house, too." He considered this. "It's a long ride, 6 hours round trip." I can handle it. Something shifted in his expression, a hint of a smile. Yeah, I guess you can. He stood, wincing slightly. We'll leave at dawn. That night, Evelyn lay in bed listening to Wade's breathing beside her, trying to remember the last time she'd felt this kind of anticipation. A trip to town shouldn't be exciting, but the thought of a full day with Wade, away from the ranch and its endless demands, made her feel like a girl again. She fell asleep smiling. They left before sunrise, the wagon loaded with empty supply crates. The morning air was sharp enough to sting, their breath fogging in the darkness. Wade had packed blankets, and Evelyn wrapped one around her shoulders as they pulled away from the ranch. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, still mostly invisible in the pre-dawn gloom. Gradually, the sky lightened, first gray, then pink, then gold as the sun broke over the horizon. It's beautiful, Evelyn said softly. Wade glanced at her. You think so? Don't you? He looked out at the landscape like he was seeing it for the first time. I guess I stopped noticing. It's just where I live. We'll start noticing again. It's worth it. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon creaking steadily beneath them. The cold gradually eased as the sun climbed higher. Evelyn found herself studying Wade's profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way he held the reins with confident, work-roughened hands. What? He asked, catching her looking. Nothing, just, this is nice. Sitting in a freezing wagon going to buy lumber? Being with you, she corrected, away from everything else. Wade's hands tightened on the reins. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. They reached Dust Ridge around 9. The town looked exactly as Evelyn remembered, a handful of buildings clinging to existence in the middle of nowhere. But this time, walking down the main street with Wade beside her, it felt less hostile, almost welcoming. Wade handled the lumber order at the general store while Evelyn browsed the limited supplies. She picked out fabric for new curtains, thread, some coffee that didn't taste like dirt. The storekeeper, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, watched her with undisguised curiosity. You're Callahan's wife, she said. Not a question. I am. Heard he got married. Didn't believe it. The woman leaned on the counter. How you finding ranch life? It's an adjustment. I bet. She smiled, not unkindly. Name's Ruth. If you need anything, advice, supplies, someone to complain to about stubborn men, you come find me. Evelyn felt something warm in her chest. Thank you. I'm Evelyn. I know who you are, honey. The whole town knows. We don't get much excitement around here. Ruth started wrapping Evelyn's purchases. But between you and me, Wade Callahan's been alone too long. Does my heart good seeing him with someone again? Wade appeared then, saving Evelyn from having to respond. He paid for everything, loaded the supplies into the wagon, and turned to Evelyn. Hungry? He asked. Starving. They ate at the town's only restaurant, a small place attached to the saloon that served decent food and strong coffee. Wade knew the owner, who greeted him with surprised pleasure. Wade Callahan as I live and breathe, and with a lady no less. The old man grinned. Thought you'd forgotten how to socialize. Just forgot how to tolerate your cooking, Pete. Pete laughed and showed them to a table near the window. Over plates of stew and fresh bread, Evelyn watched Wade interact with the few other patrons who stopped by to say hello. He was different here, still quiet, but less guarded. Like being away from the ranch let him remember how to be human. You're popular, Evelyn observed. Wade shrugged. Small town. Everybody knows everybody. They seem to like you. They like that I paid my debts and don't cause trouble. He paused. And they probably feel sorry for me, the rancher who couldn't keep a wife. Wade, it's fine. They're not wrong. He met her eyes. But things are different now. Are they? Yeah. He reached across the table and took her hand right there in public where anyone could see. They are. Evelyn's heart stumbled. This was the most open affection Wade had shown her outside the privacy of the ranch. His thumb traced circles on her palm while they finished eating, and she felt absurdly, wonderfully happy. They left town around 2, the wagon heavy with lumber and supplies. The trip back was quieter, both of them tired but content. Evelyn dozed against Wade's shoulder while he drove, his arm coming around her to keep her steady. She woke when the wagon stopped. "We there?" she mumbled. "Not quite." Wade was looking at something in the distance. "There's weather coming." Evelyn sat up, following his gaze. Dark clouds were building on the northern horizon, not the violent black of a summer storm, but the heavy gray of winter weather. "How far are we from the ranch?" she asked. "Hour, maybe more." Wade's jaw was tight. "That storm's moving faster than it should." "Can we outrun it?" "We can try." He snapped the reins, urging the horses faster. The wagon lurched forward, supplies rattling in the back. Evelyn held on to the seat, watching those clouds roll closer with unnatural speed. The temperature dropped fast. Within 20 minutes, the wind picked up, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of snow. The sky darkened from gray to nearly black. "Wade, I know." The first snowflakes fell when they were still 30 minutes from home. Within minutes, it went from scattered flakes to a wall of white. The wind howled, driving the snow sideways, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Wade slowed the horses, leaning forward to peer through the blizzard. "Can't see the road." "What do we do?" "Keep going. Carefully." His voice was tense. "If we stop, we might not find our way again." The next half hour was terrifying. The world disappeared into white chaos. The cold bit through every layer of clothing. Evelyn couldn't feel her feet anymore, and her hands ached where she gripped the wagon seat. Wade guided the horses with nothing but instinct and years of knowing this land. The wagon crept forward, every minute feeling like an hour. "There!" Wade pointed. Through the swirling snow, Evelyn could just make out the dark shape of buildings. The ranch. They'd made it. Wade drove the wagon straight to the barn, and they both jumped down into knee-deep snow. Marcus appeared from inside, his face tight with worry. "Boss, we were about to come looking for you." "Help me with the horses," Wade said. "Evelyn, get inside, now." "But the supplies, inside." She didn't argue. The house was barely warmer than outside, but at least the wind couldn't reach her. She stood in the kitchen, shaking with cold, while Wade and Marcus worked to secure everything. Danny burst through the door, snow covering his coat. "North fence is already down. Cattle are scattering." Wade cursed. "How many?" "Don't know yet. Can't see much in this." "Get lanterns. We need to—" "Wade, no." Evelyn grabbed his arm. "You just got back. You're frozen. You can't go out there again." "I don't have a choice. If the cattle scatter into this storm, we'll lose half the herd." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You need everyone you can get." She met his eyes. "I'm coming." Wade looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. "Fine. But you stay close to me. You get lost in this, you're dead. Understand?" "I understand." They geared up. Every piece of warm clothing they could find, scarves wrapped around their faces, gloves that were already soaked through. Wade handed Evelyn a rope. "Tie this around your waist. Other end goes to me. We don't let go, no matter what." She tied the rope with numb fingers while Wade did the same. Marcus and Danny prepared their own gear. Then they stepped out into the blizzard. The wind hit like a fist. Evelyn could barely breathe, barely see. Wade grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, fighting through drifts that were already waist-high in places. They reached the corrals to find chaos. Fences had collapsed under the weight of snow and wind. Cattle milled in panic, some trying to scatter into the white void beyond. If they made it out onto the open prairie in this storm, they'd freeze or get lost and die. "We need to turn them back," Wade shouted over the wind. "Keep them contained until we can repair the fence." For the next 2 hours, they fought a losing battle against nature itself. Evelyn chased cattle through snow that sucked at her boots, waving her arms and shouting until her voice gave out. Wade and Marcus worked to prop up fallen fence sections with whatever they could find. Danny hauled rope and tools, his young face red and raw from the cold. The snow didn't let up. It got worse. Evelyn lost track of time, lost track of everything except the immediate moment. Get the cow back in the corral, hold this fence post, don't let go of the rope, don't stop moving because stopping meant freezing. She didn't realize how bad things were until she saw Wade go down. He'd been hammering a support post into frozen ground when his legs gave out. He dropped to his knees in the snow, the hammer falling from his hand. "Wade!" Evelyn fought through the drifts to reach him. "Wade, get up!" "I'm fine." But his voice was slurred, his movement sluggish. He wasn't fine. None of them were. They'd been out here too long, pushed too hard, the cold was winning. Evelyn grabbed Wade's arm, trying to pull him up. He was too heavy, too exhausted. "Marcus! Danny! Help!" The two ranch hands appeared through the snow. Together they got Wade on his feet. "We need to get him inside," Marcus said. "The cattle—" Wade tried to protest. "We'll have to take care of themselves." "You're done, boss." They half-carried, half-dragged Wade toward the house. Evelyn stumbled alongside, her own legs barely working. The rope between her and Wade pulled taut, the only thing keeping them connected in the whiteout. They made it to the porch and fell through the door in a tangle of frozen limbs and snow. Marcus kicked it shut behind them, cutting off the howling wind. For a moment, they all just lay there on the floor, too cold and exhausted to move. Then Evelyn forced herself up. "We need fire and dry clothes. Wade first." Her hands were so numb she could barely work the buttons on Wade's coat, but she managed. Marcus got the stove going while Danny brought blankets. Between them, they stripped Wade of his frozen clothes and wrapped him in every blanket they could find. His skin was gray-white, his lips blue. He was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "Stay with me," Evelyn said, rubbing his hands between hers. "Come on, Wade, stay with me." His eyes focused on her slowly. "Cold. I know, but you're inside now. You're safe." She pulled him against her, wrapping her arms around him despite her own soaked clothes. Marcus brought hot coffee, and she helped Wade drink it in small sips. Gradually, color started returning to his face. The shaking eased, his breathing steadied. "You scared me," Evelyn whispered against his hair. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Didn't mean to." "You never mean to. You just work yourself half to death and expect to be fine. The cattle, forget the cattle. They're not worth dying for." Wade pulled back enough to look at her. His eyes were clearer now, more focused. "Yes, they are. They're everything. If we lose them, we lose the ranch." "And if I lose you?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "What then?" The question hung between them, raw and honest. Wade's expression shifted. Surprise, then something deeper. Something that looked like understanding. "You won't," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." "You almost did." "But I didn't." He touched her face with a hand that was finally warming up. "Because you were there. You pulled me back." Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes. She pressed her forehead against his, not caring that Marcus and Danny were watching, not caring about anything except the fact that Wade was alive and warm and here. "Don't do that again," she whispered. "Can't promise that. But I promise to try harder to come back." "That's not good enough." "It's all I've got." She kissed him then, desperate and scared and too cold to be graceful about it. Wade made a surprise sound but didn't pull away. His arms came around her, holding her close despite the layers of blankets between them. When they finally broke apart, Danny was pointedly studying the ceiling while Marcus had a small smile on his weathered face. I'll check on the animals in the barn," Marcus said. "Danny, you coming?" "Yep, definitely, coming." They left quickly, closing the door behind them. Evelyn and Wade sat on the floor in front of the stove, wrapped in blankets, holding each other while the blizzard raged outside. "I thought I was going to lose you," Evelyn said. "Out there in the snow, I thought—" "I know, I felt it too." Wade's voice was rough. "When I went down, all I could think was that I'd finally found something worth coming home to, and I was about to throw it away." "Wade, let me finish." He pulled back to look at her. "When I placed that ad, I told myself it was practical, logical. I needed help with the house, and marriage was cheaper than hiring someone. But that was a lie." "What was the truth?" "The truth was I was lonely. So lonely I could barely stand it, but I was too proud and too scared to admit it." His hand cupped her face. "And then you showed up, this woman who'd left everything behind with nothing but guts and determination, and I knew I was in trouble." "Trouble?" "Because I knew I was going to fall for you, and I spent weeks trying to stop it, trying to keep you at arm's length. But it didn't work." Evelyn's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe during that first storm. Maybe when you reorganized the supply room and I was too stubborn to admit you were right. Maybe the first morning I woke up and you were there, and the house didn't feel empty anymore." He swallowed hard. "I love you, Evelyn, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say it." Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. You stubborn, impossible man. I know. I'm working on it. I love you too. I've been trying not to, because this was supposed to be practical and safe and simple. But you're none of those things. Wade huffed a laugh. That's the nicest insult I've ever gotten. You leave water outside my door every morning. You fixed a broken rocking chair without being asked. You hold me at night like you're afraid I'll disappear. She kissed him again, softer this time. You're the best man I've ever known, and I love you so much it scares me. Good, Wade said. Because you scare me too. Good. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in blankets and each other while the storm tried to tear the world apart outside. Eventually, Wade's eyes started to droop. Come on, Evelyn said. You need to sleep. So do you. Then we'll sleep together. They made it upstairs to their room, leaving a trail of damp blankets behind them. Evelyn helped Wade into bed, then climbed in beside him. For once, they didn't stay on separate sides. Wade pulled her against him, her back to his chest, his arms secure around her waist. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? For running into the storm. For not giving up on me. For being here. Evelyn laced her fingers through his. Where else would I be? She felt him smile against her neck. Nowhere. You're stuck with me now. Good. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, but inside, wrapped in warmth and each other, Evelyn and Wade finally slept. The storm lasted 2 days. When it finally cleared, they emerged to find the ranch transformed into a white wasteland. Snow buried everything, fences, corrals, the garden Evelyn had worked so hard on. The temperature had dropped so low that simply breathing hurt, but they'd survived. All of them. The people and most of the cattle. Wade spent the next week doing damage assessment and repairs. Evelyn worked alongside him when she could, helping to dig out equipment and reinforce structures that had collapsed under the snow's weight. The crisis had changed something between them. The careful distance they'd maintained was gone. Now Wade would pull her close in the barn just because he could. Evelyn would kiss his cheek while he worked at the table. They touched constantly, small gestures that said, I'm here, you're here, we're both alive. One evening, about a week after the blizzard, Evelyn was making supper when Wade came in from checking the south pasture. He looked tired but satisfied. Lost count came back better than expected, he said, hanging up his coat. We'll be fine until spring. That's good news. Yeah. He walked over to where she stood at the stove. Evelyn, I've been thinking. That's dangerous. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. We should get married again. She turned to look at him. We're already married. I know, but that first time didn't count. It was just paper and a judge who didn't care. Wade took her hands. I want to do it right, with witnesses and a real ceremony. I want to stand in front of everyone and tell them, you're my wife because I choose you, not because it was convenient. Evelyn's throat went tight. Wade, I'm not asking you to marry me again. I'm asking if you'll let me marry you the way you deserve, the way we both deserve. She kissed him instead of answering, which Wade seemed to take as a yes. They planned it for the following Saturday, nothing fancy, just a small ceremony in the Dust Ridge Church, with the ranch hands and whoever from town wanted to attend. Evelyn sewed a new dress from fabric Ruth helped her pick out. Wade bought new boots and had his only good shirt cleaned. The morning of the ceremony, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in their room, adjusting her dress for the 10th time. Her reflection looked different than it had 3 months ago. Less haunted, more alive. Wade appeared in the doorway, already dressed. You look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself. He walked over, stopping behind her so they were both reflected in the mirror. Evelyn in her simple blue dress, Wade in his clean shirt and new boots. You sure about this? He asked quietly. About marrying you for the second time? Yeah, I'm sure. She turned to face him. Are you? Never been more sure of anything. The ceremony was short and genuine. The minister, a kind man who clearly knew Wade, spoke about partnership and commitment. Marcus and Danny stood as witnesses, both looking suspiciously emotional. Ruth and a handful of townspeople filled the pews. When it came time for the vows, Wade took Evelyn's hands and spoke clearly. I promise to come home to you every night, to trust you with my fears and my failures, to work alongside you, not ahead of you, To love you even when I'm terrible at showing it." He paused. "You saved my life, Evelyn. Not just during the storm, but before that. You made me want to live again instead of just surviving. I promised to spend the rest of my life proving I was worth saving." Evelyn was crying before he finished. When it was her turn, she had to clear her throat twice before she could speak. "I promised to stand beside you in every storm, to see the man you are, not the walls you put up, to make this house a home, and to fill it with enough warmth that you never feel alone again." Her voice shook. "You gave me a place to belong when I had nothing. I promise to belong to you for as long as you'll have me." "Forever, then," Wade said softly. "Forever." The minister pronounced them married. Again. And this time when Wade kissed her, it felt like a beginning instead of a transaction. The whole town came back to the ranch for a celebration. Ruth brought food, someone produced a fiddle, the house filled with music and laughter and life, exactly what it had been missing for so long. Late in the evening, Evelyn found herself on the porch, watching the sunset paint the snow-covered prairie in shades of gold and pink. Wade came out and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Cold?" he asked. "A little, but it's worth it for the view." They stood together, his arms around her waist, her back against his chest. "Thank you," Wade said quietly. "For what?" "For answering that ad, for getting on that train with $3 and a prayer, for being brave enough to take a chance on a stranger." He kissed her temple. "For loving me even when I made it hard." Evelyn turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for being worth it." Wade smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still caught her by surprise every time. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" "Better than okay." She kissed him softly. "We're going to be happy." Inside the house, someone started playing a slow song on the fiddle. Wade held out his hand. "Dance with me, Mrs. Callahan?" "I thought you didn't dance." "I don't. But for you, I'll try." They danced on the porch in the fading light, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and built something real from nothing but stubbornness and hope. The prairie wind blew cold around them, but neither felt it. They had each other now, and that was enough to weather any storm. Winter settled over Broken Mesa Ranch like something permanent, transforming the world into endless white broken only by the dark shapes of buildings and the skeletal branches of mesquite trees. The days were short and brutal, the nights longer and colder. But inside the ranch house, something had shifted in a way that made the cold feel distant and manageable. Evelyn woke most mornings to find Wade already up, the stove burning warm, coffee ready. He'd stopped trying to do everything alone. Now he'd wait for her, and they'd share that quiet time before the day demanded anything from them. Her reading snippets from whatever book she'd found, him planning the work ahead with occasional comments that turned into actual conversations. One morning in late December, Evelyn was kneading bread dough when Wade came in from checking the barn, snow dusting his shoulders. "Marcus says we're running low on hay," he said, shaking off his coat. "We'll need to make a run to the Patterson place before the year's out." "How far is that?" 2 days if the weather holds. 3 if it doesn't." Wade poured himself coffee. "I was thinking I'd take Danny with me." Evelyn looked up from the dough. "When?" "Day after tomorrow, probably." "That's almost a week you'd be gone." Wade paused, cup halfway to his mouth. "Yeah, does that bother you?" "Of course it bothers me. I'll miss you." Something softened in Wade's expression. Even after everything, he still seemed surprised when she said things like that. Simple truths about caring for him. "I'll miss you too," he said quietly. Then after a moment, "You could come with us." "On a 2-day cattle buying trip in the middle of winter?" "I know it sounds miserable, but it'd be better than being here alone." Evelyn smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. 3 months ago, Wade wouldn't have offered. He'd have just left and expected her to manage on her own. Now he was asking her to come along on a freezing supply run because he didn't want to be apart. "I'll stay," she said. "Someone needs to keep the house from freezing, and Marcus will be here. But you better come back when you say you will. Promise." Wade walked over and kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Make a list of anything you need from Patterson's place. They've got a bigger general store than Dust Ridge." They left 2 days later, just as the sun was rising. Evelyn stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the wagon disappear into the white landscape. The emptiness hit her immediately. Not the same hollow loneliness she'd felt in her stepfather's house, but the specific ache of missing someone you love. Marcus appeared beside her, his breath fogging in the cold air. "He'll be fine, ma'am. Wade knows those roads better than anyone." "I know. Doesn't make it easier." "No, I don't suppose it does." Marcus smiled. "But it's good, what you two have. He's different now, lighter, somehow." Evelyn glanced at him. "You think so?" "I know so. Been working for Wade for 6 years, and I've never seen him like this. Happy, I mean. Actually happy." He tipped his hat. "You did that." "We did it together." "Maybe so. But you started it by being stubborn enough to stay." After Marcus left to tend the animals, Evelyn went inside and tried to fill the day with work. She cleaned rooms that didn't need cleaning, reorganized the pantry again, baked more bread than 2 people could eat. But the house felt too quiet without Wade's presence. His footsteps, his occasional comments, the way he'd come up behind her while she cooked and rest his hand on her hip. That night, lying alone in their bed, Evelyn understood something she hadn't fully grasped before. She'd come to Texas running from one kind of loneliness only to discover a different kind entirely. The loneliness of missing someone who mattered. It hurt, but it was a good hurt. The kind that proved you had something worth missing. She fell asleep holding Wade's pillow, breathing in the faint scent of him. The second day was harder. The temperature dropped even further, and the wind picked up, rattling the windows like something trying to get in. Evelyn spent most of the day near the stove, mending clothes and trying not to imagine all the things that could go wrong on a winter cattle run. Marcus came by at supper time, stamping snow off his boots. "Brought you some company," he said. "Figured you might be getting lonely." He'd made a pot of stew in the bunkhouse and brought half of it over. They ate together at the kitchen table, Marcus telling stories about his years working ranches across Texas. Evelyn was grateful for the distraction, for the reminder that she wasn't completely alone. "You worried about him?" Marcus asked eventually. "Yes. Is that foolish?" "No, ma'am. That's love." He smiled. "Wade knows what he's doing out there, and he's got Danny with him, who's young but capable. They'll be back before you know it." But they weren't. The third day came and went with no sign of the wagon. Then the fourth. By the 5th day, Evelyn was pacing the porch despite the cold, staring at the horizon like she could will them to appear. "Could just be the weather slowing them down," Marcus said, but she could hear the worry in his voice too. "You'd tell me if you thought something was really wrong, wouldn't you?" Marcus hesitated. "Storm moved through south of here 2 days ago. If they got caught in it—" He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Evelyn remembered the blizzard that had nearly killed Wade. The thought of him trapped in another storm, miles from home, made her stomach clench with fear. That night, she couldn't sleep at all. She sat in the rocking chair Wade had fixed for her, wrapped in blankets, watching the window for any sign of light in the darkness. Around 3 in the morning, she heard it, the distant sound of horses and wagon wheels. Evelyn flew down the stairs and out onto the porch, not bothering with a coat. The cold hit her like a slap, but she barely felt it. 2 shapes were emerging from the darkness, the wagon moving slowly through the snow. "Wade!" She ran toward them, slipping in the snow, not caring. Wade pulled the wagon to a stop and jumped down, meeting her halfway. His arms came around her immediately, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I'm here," he said into her hair. "I'm here. I'm okay." "You're late. You were supposed to be back 2 days ago. I thought—" "I know. I'm sorry. The storm caught us at Patterson's place, and we had to wait it out." He pulled back to look at her, his face rough with several days of stubble, exhaustion evident in every line. "You're freezing. What are you doing out here without a coat?" "Waiting for you to come home." Something in Wade's expression cracked. He kissed her right there in the snow, cold and desperate and real. Danny cleared his throat from the wagon. Boss? I'll take care of the horses." "Thanks, Danny." Wade didn't let go of Evelyn, just scooped her up and carried her toward the house. "You're impossible, you know that? Running out into the snow in your nightdress." "You were gone too long." "I know. I hated every minute of it." Inside, Evelyn made Wade sit by the stove while she heated coffee and food. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his hands raw from the cold, but he was home. He was safe. "Tell me about the trip," she said, setting a plate in front of him. "Got the hay we needed. Patterson's asking price was robbery, but we didn't have much choice. Wade wrapped his hands around the coffee cup. Storm hit the second night. We were lucky to be at his place and not caught on the road, but it meant we couldn't leave for 2 days. You should have sent word somehow. Couldn't. Roads were impassable. He looked at her directly. But every hour I was stuck there, all I could think about was getting back to you, making sure you knew I was all right. Evelyn sat down beside him, taking his hand. I was worried. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't leave me for that long again unless you absolutely have to. Deal. Wade squeezed her hand. Patterson asked about you, actually. His wife wants to meet the woman who finally got Wade Callahan to settle down. What did you tell them? That you're too good for me and I don't know how I got this lucky. He said it plainly, like stating a simple fact. Evelyn's throat went tight. Wade, it's true. Every day I wake up expecting to find out this was all some dream, that you're not really here, or you've changed your mind, or... He trailed off, shaking his head. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. Good. Wade pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. Because I don't think I could survive losing you. They sat like that for a long time, just breathing together, the warmth of the stove wrapping around them like a promise that winter wouldn't last forever. The rest of December passed in a blur of cold and snow and small moments of warmth. Wade took to coming inside earlier in the afternoons, claiming he needed to check on supplies or repair something in the house. Evelyn suspected he just wanted to be near her, but she never called him on it. Christmas came quiet and simple. Evelyn made a special supper with dried fruit she'd been saving. Wade surprised her with a new set of hair combs he'd bought from Patterson, simple but beautiful, with delicate carved flowers. When did you get these? She asked, running her fingers over the smooth wood. At Patterson's place. Saw them and thought of you. Wade looked almost embarrassed. If you don't like them, I love them. She kissed him. Thank you. I have something else for you too, but it's not finished yet. What is it? You'll see. When it's ready. He wouldn't say more, no matter how much she asked. A week later, on a particularly cold evening, Wade asked her to close her eyes and hold out her hands. If this is a snake, I'm leaving you, Evelyn said. It's not a snake, just trust me. She closed her eyes. Something small and wooden was placed in her palms, light and delicate. Okay. Look. Evelyn opened her eyes and stared. It was a bird, a sparrow, carved from wood with incredible detail. Every feather was visible, the tiny beak perfect, the eyes somehow managing to look alive despite being carved from a single piece of wood. You made this? Her voice came out as a whisper. You mentioned once that you'd lost a keepsake after your mother died. A wooden sparrow she'd given you. Wade watched her carefully. I thought maybe you'd like a new one. Evelyn couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She just stared at this tiny, perfect thing that Wade had carved with his work-roughened hands, had spent hours creating just for her, just because she'd mentioned something in passing weeks ago. If it's not right, Wade started. It's perfect. Tears spilled down her cheeks. It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. It's just a piece of wood. No. Evelyn looked up at him. It's proof that you listen, that you care, that you pay attention to the things that matter to me. She set the sparrow down carefully and threw her arms around Wade's neck. I love you so much. Wade held her tight, his face buried in her hair. I love you too. More than I knew was possible. That night, Evelyn placed the wooden sparrow on the dresser next to her mother's locket. Two treasures, one from her past and one from her present, sitting side by side. January brought a brief thaw that turned the snow to slush and mud. The ranch became a mess of brown water and struggling to keep anything clean. But it also meant Wade could start working on repairs that had been impossible in the deep freeze. Evelyn found him one afternoon in one of the empty bedrooms upstairs, measuring the walls with a length of rope. What are you doing? She asked. Wade straightened, looking slightly guilty. Just checking something. Checking what? He was quiet for a moment, then set down the rope. This room faces east, gets good morning light, and it's the warmest room in the house after hours. Evelyn's heart started beating faster. Wade, what are you planning? I've been thinking if we ever, I mean, someday we might, he rubbed the back of his neck, clearly struggling. We might need a nursery. The word landed between them like something fragile and precious. A nursery, Evelyn repeated softly. Too soon? Wade asked quickly. I'm not saying now or even this year. I just thought, if we're planning for the future, we should think about these things. Evelyn walked over to him, taking his hands. It's not too soon, and yes, we should think about these things. You want children? Wade's voice was careful, like he was afraid of the answer. Someday, yes. Do you? I didn't think I did. After Sarah left, I convinced myself I didn't want a family, that it was too much risk, too much potential for hurt. He squeezed her hands. But with you, yeah, I want that. I want everything with you. Evelyn stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring every ounce of love and hope and future into it. When they pulled apart, Wade was smiling, that rare, full smile that transformed his whole face. So we'll keep this room empty for now, he said, but we'll know it's waiting. Waiting for the right time. Yeah, the right time. They stood together in that empty room, imagining a future neither of them had dared to dream about a few months ago. February arrived with more snow and a new challenge neither of them had anticipated. Marcus came to the house one morning looking troubled, hat in his hands. Boss, we need to talk. Wade looked up from his breakfast. What's wrong? Danny's been offered a job at the Miller Ranch. Better pay, closer to his family. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He's thinking of taking it. Wade's expression didn't change, but Evelyn saw his jaw tighten. When? End of the month, if he decides to go. After Marcus left, Wade stood and grabbed his coat without a word. Wade, Evelyn started, I need to check the north pasture. He was gone before she could say anything else. Evelyn found him that evening in the barn, supposedly repairing tack, but mostly just staring at nothing. She sat down on a hay bale beside him. You want to talk about it? She asked. Nothing to talk about. Danny's got a right to take a better job. That's not what's bothering you. Wade was quiet for a long time. Then, when Sarah left, half the ranch hands left too. Said they didn't want to work for a man whose own wife couldn't stand him. I had to rebuild everything from nothing. The ranch, the reputation, the crew. He set down the leather he'd been pretending to work on. I know it's different this time. I know Danny's leaving for good reasons, but it still feels like I'm losing something. You're not losing anything. Danny's making a choice that's right for him. Evelyn took Wade's hand. And you're a good enough man to let him go without making him feel guilty about it. When did you get so wise? I married you, didn't I? Can't be that wise. Wade huffed a laugh despite himself. Thanks for that. You're welcome. She leaned against his shoulder. Talk to Danny. Tell him you understand and you're happy for him. Let him leave knowing he's valued, not resented. Wade did talk to Danny the next day. Evelyn watched from the porch as the two of them stood by the corral, Wade's hand on Danny's shoulder, both of them nodding. When they shook hands, Danny looked relieved. You did good, Evelyn said when Wade came inside. He's a good kid. Deserves better than this place can offer right now. This place offers plenty. It offered me a home when I needed one. Wade pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. That's different. How? Because you're you, and this place is better with you in it. Danny left at the end of February with everyone's blessing and promises to visit. The ranch felt emptier without his presence, but Marcus stepped up, and Wade hired a new hand, an older man named Frank who'd worked ranches his whole life and didn't talk much, which suited Wade fine. March brought the first hints of spring. The snow melted gradually, revealing brown grass that would eventually turn green. Birds returned, filling the mornings with sound. The days grew longer, the sun stronger. Evelyn had been feeling off for about a week, tired, queasy in the mornings, her appetite strange. She told herself it was just the changing season, her body adjusting to the warming weather. But deep down, she suspected something else. Ruth confirmed it when Evelyn made a quiet trip to town, claiming she needed fabric for new curtains. You're pregnant, honey, Ruth said gently, after listening to Evelyn's symptoms. About 6 weeks, I'd guess. Evelyn sat down heavily on a crate in the general store, her hands shaking. Are you sure? Been doing this long enough to know the signs. How do you feel about it? I don't know, terrified, happy, both at once. She looked up at Ruth. I don't know how to tell Wade. Just tell him straight. Men like Wade, they don't need fancy words, just honesty. But when Evelyn got home that evening, she couldn't find the words. She served supper, washed dishes, went through all the normal motions while her secret sat heavy in her chest. Wade noticed, of course. He always noticed. You're quiet tonight, he said as they got ready for bed. Just tired. Evelyn, he turned to face her. What's wrong? She took a breath, then another. I went to see Ruth today. I thought you went for curtain fabric. That was an excuse. Her hands twisted in her nightdress. Wade, I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Wade went very still, his expression unreadable. You're sure? Ruth's sure, and I've suspected for a while. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. How far along? 6 weeks, maybe? Wade sat down on the edge of the bed, his movements careful. Evelyn's heart pounded. She couldn't read his face, couldn't tell if he was happy or scared or angry or, Wade, please say something. He looked up at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. We're going to have a baby. Yes, a baby. He stood and crossed to her, his hands cupping her face. Evelyn, we're going to have a baby. Are you happy about it? Happy? I'm terrified. I have no idea how to be a father. I'm going to mess this up in 1,000 different ways. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. But yes, I'm so damn happy I can barely breathe. Relief flooded through her. I'm scared too. We'll figure it out together, just like everything else. Wade's hand moved to her stomach, resting there gently. When? October, Ruth thinks. October. Wade's voice was full of wonder. We have 6 months to get ready. 7, actually. 7 months to turn that empty room into a nursery, to figure out how to keep a tiny human alive, to become parents. He laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. We're going to be parents. We are. They held each other for a long time, the enormity of it settling over them like snow. That night, Wade couldn't seem to stop touching Evelyn's stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. You should rest more, he said, not work so hard. Wade, I'm pregnant, not made of glass. I know, but I'll be fine. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. Other women aren't my wife. Evelyn smiled and pulled him close. I promise I'll be careful, but I'm not spending the next 7 months sitting around doing nothing. 6 months. 7. We'll compromise. 6.5. She laughed and kissed him, and for a while they forgot about counting months and just existed in the moment. 2 people about to become 3, scared and happy and absolutely certain they'd found exactly where they belonged. The next morning, Wade was already making plans. That room needs painting, he said over breakfast. And we'll need a cradle. I can build one, but I'll need good wood. And we should talk to Ruth about what else we'll need. Clothes, blankets, all of that. Wade, we have time. I know, but I want to be ready. Evelyn watched him plan and realized he was doing what he always did when faced with something emotional, turning it into work, into practical problems he could solve. It was endearing and frustrating in equal measure. Why don't we start with painting the room? She suggested. Something we can do together. Wade's expression softened. Yeah, okay, together. They spent the next few weeks transforming that empty bedroom into something new. Wade repaired cracks in the walls and replaced a broken window. Evelyn painted, a soft yellow that caught the morning light beautifully. They worked side by side, talking about names and arguing good-naturedly about whether yellow was too bright or just right. Marcus figured it out before they told him, just from the way Wade started coming in earlier and checking on Evelyn more often. Congratulations, he said one evening, his smile genuine and warm. How did you know? Evelyn asked. Boss has been acting like a man with something precious to protect. Only one thing makes a man look that terrified and happy at the same time. Word spread through Dust Ridge faster than wildfire. Ruth told someone who told someone else, and suddenly everyone knew. People started stopping by with gifts, a handmade quilt from Ruth, a rattle carved from wood by the old man who ran the saloon, advice that Evelyn didn't ask for but appreciated anyway. The ranch itself seemed to respond to the news. Spring came in full force, turning the brown prairie green again. Evelyn's garden burst into life. The cattle fattened on new grass. Everything felt alive and possible. One evening in late April, Evelyn stood in the nursery doorway, looking at the painted walls and the cradle Wade had built, simple but sturdy, sanded smooth so there were no rough edges. Wade came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his hands resting on the small swell of her stomach that was finally starting to show. "You did good work," Evelyn said. "We did good work," Wade corrected. "None of this happens without you. I'm pretty sure the baby was a team effort, too." He laughed against her hair. "Yeah, I guess it was." They stood there in the doorway of the room that was waiting, watching the sunset paint the walls in shades of gold and pink, and felt the future unfold before them like a promise finally being kept. Summer arrived with a heat that made Evelyn's pregnancy feel twice as hard as it probably was. By June, she was showing enough that her dresses needed letting out, and the simplest tasks left her breathless and sweating. Wade hovered constantly, driving her half crazy with concern. "I'm fine," she said for the 100th time, swatting his hand away as he tried to take the laundry basket from her. "You shouldn't be carrying heavy things." "It's laundry, Wade, not boulders." "Still?" He took the basket anyway. "Ruth said you need to rest more." "Ruth also said I need to keep moving or I'll swell up like a tick. Make up your mind which advice you're following." Wade set the basket down and pulled her close, his hand on her rounded stomach. "I'm following the advice that keeps you both safe." Evelyn softened despite her frustration. "We're safe, I promise." "I know, I just—" He trailed off, but she understood. Wade had lost too much in his life to take anything for granted. Every day with her, every week the baby grew, felt like something that could be taken away. "I'm not going anywhere," she said gently. "You're stuck with us." "Good." He kissed her forehead. "Now go sit down before you fall down." Bossy. "You married me. Too late to complain now." She did sit down, though, because her back was killing her and her feet had swollen to twice their normal size. Wade brought her water and propped pillows behind her back without being asked, then went to hang the laundry himself. Evelyn watched him through the window, this man who'd been so closed off and frightened of connection, now hanging her dresses with careful attention. Life had a strange sense of humor sometimes. The baby moved then, a flutter that was becoming more common. She put her hand over the spot, feeling it again. A kick. A real, definite kick. "Wade!" she called. "Wade, come here." He dropped the laundry and ran inside, his face pale. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Give me your hand." She placed his palm on her stomach and waited. For a moment, nothing. Then the baby kicked again, strong enough that Wade's eyes went wide. That's your son or daughter saying hello?" Wade stared at her stomach like it contained the entire universe. "It's real," he said quietly. "I mean, I knew it was real, but feeling it, that's our baby in there. That's our baby." He knelt down in front of her, both hands on her stomach now, waiting for more movement. When the baby kicked again, Wade laughed, a sound of pure, unguarded joy that Evelyn had never heard from him before. "Hey there," he said softly to her belly. "I'm your father. I don't know much about being a parent, but I promise I'll try my best. And your mother? Your mother is the bravest person I know. You're lucky to have her." Evelyn's eyes burned with tears. "Wait, I mean it." He looked up at her. "I was half dead when you showed up, just going through the motions, waiting for life to finally finish me off. And then you walked into that courthouse with nothing but courage and $3, and you saved me. You saved everything." "You saved me too," Evelyn whispered. "I was running from a life that would have crushed me. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building something real." Wade stood and pulled her into his arms as carefully as he could manage around her stomach. They held each other while the baby kicked between them, this tiny person who'd brought them together in ways neither of them had anticipated. July brought news that shattered their peaceful bubble. Marcus rode back from town one afternoon with a grim expression and a letter. He handed it to Evelyn without a word. The return address made her stomach drop. San Antonio. Her stepfather's handwriting. "What is it?" Wade asked, coming out of the barn. "Letter from Harold Mercer." Her hands shook as she opened it. The words inside were brief and brutal. Harold was dying, some kind of lung disease the doctors couldn't fix. He was asking her to come back to San Antonio, to be there at the end. He claimed he'd changed, that he wanted to make amends before he died. Evelyn read it twice, feeling nothing but a strange numbness. "What does he want?" Wade asked quietly. She handed him the letter. Wade's expression darkened as he read. "You're not going," he said flatly. "Wade, no. This man made your life hell, tried to sell you off to the highest bidder. You don't owe him anything. He's dying." "Good. He deserves worse." The venom in Wade's voice surprised her. She touched his arm. "I'm not saying I want to go. I'm just saying, I don't know, maybe I need to." "Why?" Evelyn struggled to find the words. "Because if I don't, I'll always wonder. Wonder if he really did want to make amends. Wonder if I could have been the bigger person." She looked down at her stomach. "And I don't want our child to have a mother who's still carrying that weight around." Wade was silent for a long moment. Then, "If you go, I'm going with you. You can't leave the ranch for that long. Marcus and Frank can handle it for a week. You're not facing that man alone." "Wade." "This isn't negotiable, Evelyn. If you're going, I'm going. End of discussion." She saw the fear beneath his stubbornness, the terror that if she left, she might not come back, that San Antonio might reclaim her somehow. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll go together." They left 3 days later, taking the train south. The journey was harder than Evelyn's first trip to Dust Ridge. She was 6 months pregnant now, uncomfortable in every position, the heat making everything worse. Wade stayed beside her constantly, bringing water, adjusting pillows, glaring at anyone who looked at her too long. San Antonio felt like a different world, loud and crowded and full of memories Evelyn had tried to forget. The house where she'd grown up looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. The maid who answered the door barely recognized her. "Miss Evelyn?" "Lord, I thought you'd disappeared forever." "It's Mrs. Callahan now. Is he upstairs?" "In his bedroom. Be warned, he's not the man you remember." She wasn't wrong. Harold Mercer had been a large, imposing man who'd ruled his house with anger and whiskey. The person in the bed was a skeleton, yellowed skin stretched over bones, breathing labored and wet. His eyes opened when Evelyn entered. "You came." "I came." She stayed in the doorway, Wade a solid presence behind her. "This is my husband, Wade." Harold's gaze flicked to Wade, then back to her. "You're pregnant." "Yes." "Good. That's good." He coughed, a horrible rattling sound. "I wasn't sure you'd come. After everything. I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you." More coughing. "I was a terrible stepfather, terrible man if I'm being honest. Your mother deserved better. You deserved better." Evelyn felt Wade's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Why did you ask me to come?" "Because I'm dying, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know sorry is worthless after what I put you through. But I needed you to hear it anyway." Harold's eyes were wet. "I drank because I hated myself. And I took it out on you because you reminded me of your mother, and your mother reminded me of everything good I'd destroyed." "That's not an excuse." "No, it's not. It's the truth." He struggled to sit up. "The house is yours, what's left of it. The lawyer has the papers, and there's some money, not much, but enough to give your child a start." "I don't want your money." "Then give it to charity. Burn it. I don't care. I just wanted you to know it's there." Another fit of coughing, worse this time. When it passed, Harold looked even grayer. "I'm glad you found someone. Glad you got out. I hope you're happy." Evelyn looked at this dying man who'd made her childhood a misery and felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. Like a weight she'd been carrying was finally being set down. "I am happy," she said quietly. "Despite everything you did, I found my way to a good life. I have a husband who loves me, a home, a baby on the way. You don't get credit for any of that, but I wanted you to know I survived you." Harold nodded weakly. "That's all I could ask for." They stayed in San Antonio for 3 more days. Harold died on the second night, quietly and alone, despite the maid sitting with him. Evelyn felt nothing when she got the news. No grief, no relief, just emptiness. The funeral was small, A few business associates who'd known him, the household staff, Evelyn and Wade. Margaret came too, embracing Evelyn with tears and exclamations about the baby. "Look at you," Margaret said, stepping back, married and glowing and so far from that scared girl I knew. "A lot can change in a year, I'll say. And your husband," Margaret glanced at Wade, who stood a respectful distance away. "He looks at you like you hung the moon. He's a good man. You deserve a good man." Margaret squeezed her hands. "Write to me, will you? Let me know when the baby comes. I want to hear that you're still happy." "I will. I promise." The lawyer handled the paperwork. The house would be sold, the money put in trust. Evelyn signed everything numbly, ready to be done with this part of her life forever. On the train back to Texas, Wade finally asked the question she knew had been bothering him. "Are you all right?" Evelyn leaned against his shoulder, watching the landscape roll past. "I think so. It's strange. I thought I'd feel more grief or anger or something, but mostly I just feel tired. Like I've been carrying this heavy thing for so long, and now it's finally over." "You don't have to feel any particular way about it." "I know, but I keep thinking about what he said, about me reminding him of my mother." She touched her stomach. "I don't want our child to ever feel like a burden, like they're responsible for our happiness or our failures." "They won't." Wade's arm tightened around her. "Because we're not like that. We're not like them. Your stepfather or my father or any of the people who hurt us. We're going to be better." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. And I know that anyone raised by you will know love and safety and what it means to be valued." He kissed her temple. "And I'll do my damnedest to be the kind of father who shows up and stays, no matter how hard things get." Evelyn turned to look at him. "You're going to be a wonderful father." "I'm going to try. That's all I can promise." "That's enough." They arrived back at Broken Mesa Ranch on a scorching August afternoon to find Marcus and Frank had kept everything running smoothly. The house felt cool and welcoming after the heat of the train. Evelyn had never been so happy to be home. That night, lying in their bed with Wade's hand on her stomach, she realized something important. San Antonio wasn't home anymore. That scared girl who'd answered a newspaper ad felt like a different person entirely. This was home now, this ranch, this man, this life they were building together. "Thank you for coming with me," she said into the darkness. "Where else would I be? I mean it. You didn't have to face all that with me." "Yes, I did." Wade's voice was firm. "We're partners, Evelyn. That means the hard stuff, too, not just the good days." She rolled over to face him, difficult with her belly in the way. "I love you. I love you too. Now sleep. The baby's been kicking for an hour and you're exhausted." She smiled and closed her eyes, Wade's warmth beside her, home in every sense of the word. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the knowledge that the baby would come soon. Evelyn was enormous now, moving slowly, uncomfortable in every position. Wade had started sleeping in fits, jerking awake at every sound she made. "You need rest too," she told him one night after he'd woken for the third time. "Can't help it. Keep thinking I'll miss something." "You won't miss it. Trust me, when labor starts, you'll know." But when it did start, 2 weeks later, it wasn't dramatic like she'd expected, just a dull ache in her back that gradually got worse throughout the day. She was kneading bread when the first real contraction hit, strong enough to make her gasp and grab the counter. Wade looked up from the accounts he'd been reviewing. "Evelyn? I think it's time." The next 12 hours were the longest of Wade's life. Ruth came from town, calm and efficient, taking over the bedroom and sending Wade downstairs with instructions to boil water and stay out of the way. Marcus kept him company in the kitchen, both of them jumping at every sound from upstairs. "First babies take a while," Marcus said, trying to be reassuring. "Could be hours yet." It was hours. Long, agonizing hours where Wade paced and prayed to anyone who might be listening and cursed himself for putting Evelyn through this. Every cry of pain from upstairs felt like a knife in his chest. "I should be up there," he said for the 10th time. "Ruth said to stay down here." "I don't care what Ruth said. That's my wife." But he stayed, because Evelyn had made him promise not to hover. She'd been clear about that. Ruth would handle the delivery, and Wade's job was to not panic and get in the way. He was failing spectacularly at the not panicking part. It was just past midnight when he heard it, a thin, piercing wail that made every hair on his body stand up. Marcus grinned. "That's a baby, boss." Wade was up the stairs before his brain fully processed the words. He burst into the bedroom to find Ruth cleaning a tiny red screaming bundle while Evelyn lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair soaked with sweat. "Is she—" Wade couldn't finish the question. "She's fine," Ruth said. "And so is your daughter. Perfect little girl, healthy as can be." Daughter. He had a daughter. Ruth wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and handed her to Evelyn, who cradled her with tears streaming down her face. Wade crossed to the bed on shaking legs, looking down at the tiny person they'd created. She was perfect, impossibly small, with a scrunched-up face and dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, furious at being born into a cold, bright world. "She has your lungs," Wade said, his voice rough. Evelyn laughed through her tears. "And your stubbornness, I'm guessing. She didn't want to come out." "Can I—" Wade reached out, then pulled back, afraid. "Of course." Evelyn shifted the baby toward him. "Meet your father, little one." Wade took his daughter with hands that shook, terrified he'd drop her or break her or do something irredeemably stupid. But the moment she settled in his arms, something clicked into place. She stopped crying, her tiny eyes opening to stare up at him. "Hey there," he whispered. "I'm your dad, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I promise I'll figure it out." The baby made a small sound, her hand wrapping around his finger with surprising strength. "She likes you," Evelyn said softly. "How can you tell?" She stopped screaming. Wade looked down at his daughter, and felt something break open in his chest. Not the breaking that came with loss, but the breaking that came with too much love trying to fit in a space too small for it. "What should we name her?" he asked. Evelyn smiled tiredly. "I was thinking Sarah Rose, Rose for my mother, and Sarah because it's a good name, and I want to reclaim it from bad memories." Wade looked at her in surprise. "You sure?" "I'm sure. Sarah Rose Callahan. What do you think?" He looked down at the baby in his arms, this tiny person who'd already changed everything. "I think it's perfect. She's perfect." Ruth cleaned up and left them alone, promising to check in the next day. Wade sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Sarah, while Evelyn dozed fitfully beside him. He couldn't stop looking at his daughter. Couldn't believe that something this small and fragile and absolutely perfect had come from him and Evelyn. He'd spent so much of his life convinced he didn't deserve good things, that happiness was for other people. But here it was, wrapped in a blanket and sleeping in his arms. "I'll be better," he whispered to Sarah. "I won't be perfect. I'll make mistakes. But I promise I'll always show up. I'll always choose you and your mother. I'll work every day to be worthy of this." Sarah yawned, completely unimpressed by his promises, and Wade fell even more in love. The weeks that followed were chaos. Sarah had a strong will and no interest in sleeping when they wanted her to. She'd sleep all day and scream all night, leaving both Wade and Evelyn stumbling around in exhaustion. Feeding was a struggle. Diaper changes were a disaster. Everything took 3 times as long as it should have. But they figured it out together, the same way they'd figured out everything else. Wade learned to change diapers with the same focused attention he used to mend fences. Evelyn learned to sleep standing up. They took turns walking the floor with Sarah at 3 in the morning, both of them too tired to form complete sentences. And somehow, in the middle of the chaos, they found joy. The first time Sarah smiled at Wade, a real smile, not gas, he stood there with tears running down his face. The first time she grabbed Evelyn's finger on purpose, Evelyn spent an hour just staring at that tiny hand. The first time she laughed, a pure, delighted sound, they both stopped everything just to make her do it again. Marcus became a doting uncle, carving wooden toys and making ridiculous faces to earn baby smiles. Frank pretended to be gruff, but was caught more than once holding Sarah and singing off-key lullabies. Ruth visited weekly with advice and food and the wisdom of someone who'd raised 5 children of her own. The ranch itself seemed to settle into contentment. The cattle fattened, the grass grew green, the repairs held. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still struggles with money and weather and all the 1,000 things that could go wrong on a ranch. But it was theirs, and it was good. One evening in late November, almost exactly a year after their second wedding, Evelyn stood on the porch watching the sunset. Sarah was asleep in the cradle Wade had built, finally sleeping at a reasonable hour. Wade came out and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. "Just thinking about how much has changed. A year ago, we were getting married for the second time, and now—" She gestured at the house, the land, everything. "Now we have all this." "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I didn't place that ad sooner." Wade turned her to face him. "I wasted a lot of time being afraid. Being alone because it felt safer than risking my heart again. But you took the risk anyway. Best decision I ever made." He kissed her softly. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think we're going to be okay. Not perfect. We'll fight sometimes. We'll make mistakes. We'll have hard years and years where money's tight and the weather doesn't cooperate." He smiled. "But we'll face it together. And that's enough." Evelyn thought about the scared woman who'd stepped off the train with $3 and no plan. Thought about the closed-off man who'd married her out of desperation. They'd both been so broken, so convinced that safety meant isolation. But they'd been wrong. Safety wasn't found in walls and distance. It was found in standing beside someone and saying, "I'll stay, even when it's hard." It was found in morning coffee and repaired rocking chairs and tiny carved sparrows, in hands held during storms and promises kept in darkness. It was found in choosing each other, over and over again, until choosing became as natural as breathing. "You're right," Evelyn said. "We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be happy." "We already are." Inside the house, Sarah started fussing. Wade sighed. "Guess the peace was too good to last." "I'll get her." "We'll both get her." They went inside together, to the nursery that had once been an empty room waiting for a purpose. Sarah was awake and waving her fists, not quite crying but getting there. Wade picked her up while Evelyn checked her diaper. "Clean," Evelyn reported. "Just lonely, I think." "Can't have that." Wade carried Sarah to the window, showing her the last of the sunset. "Look at that, sweetheart. That's the prairie where your mother chased cattle in a storm, where your father learned that being alone isn't the same as being strong." Sarah gurgled, her tiny hand patting his face. "She's going to have you wrapped around her finger," Evelyn said, watching them. "Already does." Wade looked at Evelyn over Sarah's head. "You both do." Later, after Sarah was fed and sleeping again, Wade and Evelyn sat in the rocking chair together, her in his lap, both of them exhausted and content. Through the window, they could see the prairie stretching endlessly under a sky full of stars. "Do you ever miss San Antonio?" Wade asked quietly. "The life you might have had?" "No. That life would have killed me slowly." Evelyn laced her fingers through his. "This life, this messy, hard, beautiful life, this is the one I was meant for. I know that now. Even with the screaming baby and the cattle and the endless work. Especially with all that. Because it's real, it's mine, it's ours." Wade held her tighter, his face pressed against her hair. "I love you, Evelyn Callahan. I'll never stop being grateful that you answered that ad. I love you too, and I'll never stop being grateful that you placed it." They sat there in the darkness, holding each other, listening to Sarah's soft breathing from the nursery. The prairie wind moved through the dry grass outside, the same wind that had blown through this empty house when Wade had lived here alone, convinced that solitude was all he deserved. But that was a different house now, a different life. This house was full of voices and laughter and the chaotic beauty of family. It held mornings spent over coffee and evenings on the porch. It held arguments resolved and promises kept. It held a tiny girl who'd grow up knowing she was loved and wanted and safe. It held everything that mattered. Evelyn thought about all the choices that had led her here. Some made in fear, some in hope. Some just in desperate need. She thought about the girl with $3 and a newspaper clipping, brave enough to bet everything on a stranger. That girl had been terrified. But she'd also been right. Sometimes the scariest choices were the ones that saved you. Sometimes love was found in the most unlikely places. In a plain courthouse ceremony, in fresh water left by a door, in hands held during a blizzard. Sometimes home wasn't a place you were born, but a place you built, brick by stubborn brick, with someone who chose to build it alongside you. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone who saw you at your worst and loved you anyway, who stood beside you in storms and held you in darkness and believed in the future you could create together. Wade shifted slightly, adjusting his hold on her. You falling asleep? Maybe. Comfortable, though. Want me to carry you to bed? In a minute. This is nice. So they stayed. Two people who'd been broken learning how to be whole, wrapped in each other and the quiet certainty that they'd found exactly where they belonged. Outside, the Texas sky held more stars than anyone could count, endless and bright and full of promise. And inside, in a ranch house on the edge of nowhere, Wade and Evelyn Callahan held each other close and knew, without question, that they were home,